23% the younger. Some studies go on and say not only they make CEOs and are leaders, the older siblings, but also like sometimes they're physically larger, sometimes even higher IQ. But then on the other side, that I know the sisters are all looking at each other right now, and then the younger brother though, or the younger siblings, oftentimes more creative, maybe more comical even. Whether these are nonsense or not, it does seem like if you look at the world, there are kind of almost like two different types of people. There's those who kind of like, they're responsible, they do the right thing, they take leadership, they're in charge, they find good jobs, and maybe the other one are more, a little more, maybe they're more casual, maybe, if that's the word, maybe rebellious, maybe they're risk takers, maybe unpredictable. And the first hand is the one who graduates and gets a good job and lives by mom and dad, and the other one's the one who like goes off to like Fort Myers, I guess, right, and lives there. But you get what I'm saying here. And I think there's more than just like pop theology here, or pop psychology here. Even in Jesus' life, he was surrounded by two different types of people. He's surrounded by, the people who like, they did the right thing. They followed the rules. They desired God. They had a heart for God. But then there's these other folks who kind of like just did their own thing. And it's this conflict of these two different types of people that actually, that's why Jesus told this story. That's why Jesus told the story of the prodigal son, if you look at the context in Luke 15. So last week we talked about the younger brother, and we spent time on that. But today I want to go back and talk about the context behind this passage and why Jesus even told this story. So in Luke 15, we'll just go ahead, and I want to begin Luke 15, verse 1 and 2. John, go ahead and hit the slides. All the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around Jesus to listen to him. The Pharisees and legal experts were grumbling and saying, "This man welcomes sinners and he sits with them." And just right there off the bat, you see this setup that there's conflict between two different kinds of people. You got the Pharisees over here, and then you got the tax collectors and sinners. And I want to just paint a little picture of these Pharisees for us, because so often I think the church almost oversimplifies and overgeneralizes maybe who these Pharisees are, that like they're bad people. And in fact, actually the opposite's true. They were actually like, from the outside, they were really good people. They were pious for God. They did the right thing. They followed the rules. Their hearts desired God. If you lived next to them, if they were your neighbor, they would probably be good and wonderful people. You would want them to live by you. They did the right things. And then on the flip side, you got the tax collectors and sinners. And I know we kind of have a soft spot for them because that's who Jesus spent time with. And we think maybe they were just like, maybe, I don't know, maybe what I read, maybe like party people, just happy-go party people. But no, they were actually kind of bad people. You know what I mean? Their hearts weren't for God. They did the wrong things. They were greedy. They were sinners, ultimately. And you can kind of they took advantage of people. And you can kind of understand right there, knowing that little aspect, why Jesus would need to spend time with their sinners and tax collectors. He would need to spend time with them. But you can also see why the Pharisees over here would be like a little jealous or have resentment about them. And why was Jesus spending time over there with those people? They do things wrong. Well, it's in that, it's in understanding that Jesus shares this story. While the younger brother might get more the attention, he's also talking to older brother types. By the way, I read this story to Colton last night in his little children's Bible, and doesn't even mention the older brother. It just stops with the younger brother. Interesting note. But when we put this in a context, just remember that Jesus is also talking to older brother types. So we're just going to go ahead and begin with our story. We're going to take off where we ended last week, verse 25. Now his older son was in the field. Coming in and from the field, he approached the house and he heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what was going on. The servant replied, "Your brother has arrived, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he received his son back safe and sound." Then the older son was furious, and he didn't want to enter in. But his father came out and begged him, and he answered his father, "Look, I've served you all these years. I've never disobeyed your instructions. Yet you've never given me as much as a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this your son of yours returned after gobbling up your estate on prostitutes, you slaughter the fattened calf for him?" I want to just stop right there and just think about this. So Jesus gets to this point of the story where the older brother, he comes home and he finds out there's this return of his brother. There's this huge celebration for his brother going on. His father welcomed him in. There's a celebration. Right there, it tells you a little something about the older brother. First, he's no slouch. He's no lazy guy. He's out and he's working on the fields. He's working hard. He's doing the right things. Then he approaches the house. There's music and there's dancing. And he finds out that his younger brother who ran off is home. And I don't think he's necessarily mad because his brother's home or his brother came back. I don't think he's so much mad because his father welcomed him back. I think he's mad because his father welcomed him back and that there's a celebration. That there's a celebration going on. Just think about that. The older brother got angry. He's not angry because his brother's back, but because his father is celebrating. Last week I showed you this painting. If you go back to that painting really quickly, you notice I read one commentary about that painting. It said, the father and the son, they look the same. They have the same coat, that hat, from outward appearance. The older brother looks a lot like the father. I mean, and you could probably imagine that even the older brother, his behavior was a lot like the father. He was a hard worker. He was probably a leader. He did the right things. He followed the rules. He worked hard. On the outside, he looked just like his father. But it was when the younger brother returned, you got to see a little bit of a difference in the older brother and the father. If you notice, the father is here with his hands on his son as like an act of compassion. And the older brother is standing with his arms crossed, looking at him with judgment and resentment. While the older brother and father, they look the same on the outside, when you get into the inside of the heart of the older brother, you see the real difference. See, older brother types, they look a lot like their father. I don't mean like literal father. But older brother types, when you look at them from the outside, they look like really great people. They have everything put together, and there's a reason for that, because they are. They do the things that they're supposed to do, and that's why it's deceptive, because simply looking at outward appearance, it looks like they're close to God, that they are found, they're put together. Things are A-okay. And that's why Jesus tells the story. He reveals that even though the older brother looked and looks like his father, he stayed at home, he followed the rules, the older brother is just as lost as the younger brother ever was. But at the older brother's lostness, it was just more deceptive. See, it's easy to see the younger brother sins and younger brother's life. It's out there. It's behavior. It's foolish. It's obvious. But older brother, it's not always so. It's hidden. It's in the sin of the heart. So I want us to think about this morning. Think about older brother types, whether it's biological or not. I want to just throw out 4 characteristics of older brother types and let me know if this describes you at all. First, they're marked more by burden than joy. Like they have this like burden or this They feel like they have this responsibility that they have to be like the model in their family. Henry Newman, who wrote a book about this painting, he wrote in a little commentary that so often in his life, he always had to live up to people's expectations. It was like expectations of his mom and dad, expectations of teachers, expectations of pastors, expectations of later on a bishop. So much of his life was just living up to expectations of others. And then you get to our scripture says, the older brother said, I've been working like a slave for you. Just notice the older brother's words there. I've been working like a slave for you. In other words, he tells his dad, this life you wanted me to live, it's been burdensome. This word slave in the Greek denotes burden, oppressive thing that's been laid on your back. And one of the features of older brother lostness is that you do more out of obligation, more out of duty, more out of satisfying others' expectations than just doing out of pure, authentic joy. Does that describe anybody? That we do things just out of expectations of others. We do things only out of duty, obligations, rather than having authentic joy. Because if not, it leaves us burdensome, it leaves us tired. Well, a second feature of the older brother lostness is a life characterized by superiority, then solidarity. The older brothers are used to feeling a sense of superiority, that they're good at life. When the older brother starts talking to his dad, I don't know if you caught it in Scripture, I tried to stress it a little bit, but he says, this son of yours. He doesn't use his brother's name. He doesn't even say, my brother. That son of yours, he doesn't want to have any identification with that son. This son of yours comes back and you throw this huge party, you cut the biggest calf. You didn't even give me a little goat to celebrate with my friends. But this son of yours does this. See, older brother types often compare themselves to others. They're oftentimes smarter, maybe taller, more athletic, better job, more money, maybe more people admire them. They're more successful. You see, older brother lostness is also often characterized by looking at other people, by finding meaning, by being better. See, older brother lostness is characterized by superiority. That is why we're so angry when God's grace is given to others who we think don't deserve it. Think about that. A third characteristic of older brother lostness is that their lives are more characterized by resentment than sorrow. And that's really kind of where our story lands today. Older brother types, when things don't go our way, we don't grieve, but we're resentful. We're not sad, but we're angry. And that's what we see in our story today. The older brother, he's not sad that his brother gets all these benefits and that he's not, but he's angry and he's resentful. Because as much as older brothers don't like to admit it, they live in a world that fundamentally says that I do good, so I expect good to happen to me. The better you do at life, at work, at religion, the more you go to church, the better things come to you. And that's why when he goes to his father, if you notice what he says to his father, his opening line to his father was, listen up, I've done everything. I haven't done anything wrong. And to get blunt here, older brother types live in a relationship with God that if I'm a good person, good things happen. The better I am, the better I will be. But when hardship comes, pain comes, it's not sadness, but bitterness, resentment, and they get angry. We say, I've done all this. I've been good. I try to follow the rules. I go to church. What more do you want from me, God? And it becomes clear by the end of the story that the older brother is just as lost, but maybe even more so than the younger brother ever was. See, the older brother, it's difficult for us to see his sin because it doesn't manifest in behavior or great moral failures like the younger brother, but it manifests itself in conditions of the heart, like jealousy, like bitterness, like anger, like resentment, like burdensome of life. And in closing, I can only suspect we probably have a lot of older brothers here, types here, whether you're born as the older child or not. But Jesus ends the story in a way that I love. It's an open-ended question. And the father could have just easily written off the older brother, could ignore him, not invite him in. Instead, the father goes to the older brother and says in verse 31, and John, I have that on our screen, "Son, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and we had to be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive. He was lost and he is found." For older brother types among us, the father doesn't let him go. He says, everything that I have, it's already yours. You don't have to be good enough. You don't have to deserve it. I just want you to come and experience the joy of going into the house. See, we have to celebrate because your younger brother is back home. I just want you to come into the home and celebrate that. And I think what Jesus leads, remember the context, he's talking to some Pharisees here. Jesus leads the Pharisees and us listening in this open-ended question. Will you come to the party? Will your life be less characterized by resentment, superiority, jealousy, burdensome of life, and be more characterized by joy, by grace, by true celebration of what's happening in the life of others? Last week we ended with the younger brother. At some point, Scripture said that he came to himself. He was literally eating the pig's leftovers, and he came to himself, and he had to literally turn around. We use the biblical word repent. He had to turn around. And that's really the same thing that the older brother has to do. He has to come to himself and turn and come back. Although the older brother, he didn't go far off, nevertheless, he's outside of the house. He's probably in the driveway. He probably has his back turned against the party. He probably has his arms up. And the question is, will he turn around and go into the party? It's an open-ended question. Will he come to himself and enter into the house of joy? Amen. At this time, if you are able, I'm going to go ahead and invite you to stand. We're going to sing our closing hymn. It can be found on hymn number 560, Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. 560.